Hi everyone. So for today's session, we are basically, understanding what is CCAR and DFAST. So CCAR and DFAST are used extensively in the banks, and you will see a lot of quants working specifically for CCAR and DFAST. So in this session, what I'll walk you through is, okay, what is CCAR, what is DFAST, what is the complete life cycle of building a quantitative model for CCAR and DFAST. So once I walk you through for what is the whole life cycle, then I'll let you know how do you validate the model, because building a model is an exercise and then validating the model is another exercise, because you need to make sure when there are few statistical tests which you need to follow when you validate the model. So the idea for this session is basically understanding CCAR DFAST, the whole model life cycle of a quantitative model, or any time series model for that matter. So let's start. So the first question is, okay, what is CCAR and what is DFAST, right? So if you see, CCAR is nothing but, so let me first tell you what is the full form. So CCAR is nothing but comprehensive capital analysis and review. Comprehensive capital analysis and review. Whereas DFAST on the other hand is DFAST. Okay, DFAST on the other hand is nothing but Dodd-Frank Act stress testing. So if you see the name itself, right, you might understand why these, what is the main reason. If you see, for CCAR, the main goal is to do capital analysis. And for DFAST, the main goal is to do stress testing, right? So let's understand what is CCAR, when was it developed, what was the purpose of it, what is the scope of it, what are key components, and what are the outcomes of a CCAR and DFAST. So let's understand let me give you an overview of CCAR first. So let me give you an overview of CCAR. See, first of all, it was initiated by the Federal Reserve in 2011. It was initiated by the Federal Reserve. See, first of all, I'll want you all to understand why the reason why there was a reason to develop these CCAR and DFAS was after the 2007-8 financial crisis, right? People realized the importance of risk management, the importance of capital, why capital is important for a bank. So they understood, okay, it's important to do capital. Bank should have capital adequacy to handle stress conditions. So that's why they need to do capital planning. They need to stress test their models or whatever they have in their portfolio, and then they have to perform qualitative and quantitative review. So after the financial crisis, these were the some of the observations that were highlighted, and that's why like these two different frameworks were developed, the CCAR and the DFAST. End goal was to understand if the bank is able to sustain in difficult economic situations. So this was initiated by Federal Reserve in 2011. What was the purpose of it? So CCAR is nothing but it is designed to ensure that the large banks in the US have robust capital planning processes and sufficient capital to continue operation during economic and financial stress. Okay, so CCAR is designed to ensure that CCAR is designed to ensure that large banks in the US have robust capital planning processes, and so they should have robust capital planning processes and of course sufficient capital to continue operation during economic and financial stress. See, we all know that back in 2008, right? what happened was Lehman, there were so many big banks like Lehman Brothers, it got failed. And people had so much trust on Lehman Brothers, right? And it was such a huge bank. But that's why it's very important to do all this capital, to all this capital planning processes, so that you understand how to plan your capital in the future. And also at the same time, you should have sufficient capital. Like if you see what happened recently with the Silicon Valley Bank, right? It got there was a lot of issue, and I guess they raised for a bankruptcy or something like that, right? So making sure you should have sufficient capital, so that in challenging time, the bank can operate. So, and then the next piece is applicability. Okay. So it is not that all the banks has to perform CCAR and DFAST, right? There are certain situation or certain, threshold, which basically bank has to. I mean, if it applies to bank, then only they have to perform CCAR and DFAST. So basically, CCAR applies to all the large bank holding companies with a total consolidated asset of 100 billion or more. And this is like very important. So what it means is basically if someone has, so let's say if someone has, okay, let me write first. It applies to large bank holding companies with total consolidated asset of 100 billion or more. See, that's why this becomes very important. So let's say if a bank, there's a bank, right? And if the total consolidated asset is, let's say, less than $100 billion, right? Then CCAR won't apply to that. CCAR won't apply to that. But if, let's say, if there's a bank which has asset total consolidated asset of $100 billion, then definitely CCAR will be applied to that. So that's why it's important to understand what is the total consolidated asset of the bank. And but if you see, that's why if you see the smaller banks, right? Smaller banks in this case, they don't have to perform CCAR and DFAST. I mean, they don't have to perform CCAR. Why? Because for smaller banks, basically what I mean here is asset is less than $100 billion. Okay. So now understanding, CCAR, we understand, okay, it's nothing but capital. You use CCAR for, understanding the capital analysis and, understanding what will happen during stress situation, right? If the bank can operate or not. But what are the key components of CCAR? This is also very important to understand. What are the key components of CCAR? So the key components of CCAR are capital adequacy, second is capital planning, third is stress testing, and fourth is qualitative review. So when I say components of CCAR, basically you need to perform each of them to complete your CCAR, to complete the comprehensive this thing, to complete the comprehensive capital analysis and review. Okay. So let's understand each of them. What is capital adequacy? See, capital adequacy nothing but banks in general should demonstrate that they have enough capital to cover all the potential losses and can continue their operations. Okay. So if you see the English word also, capital adequacy, there should be enough capital, adequate capital, right? So it's the same thing. So banks must demonstrate that they have enough capital to cover the potential losses and continue operation during stress conditions. And continue operations during. See, even in interviews also, right? If there's any opening for CCAR and DFAST, even if you know, okay, what is CCAR, and if you say all these components of CCAR, right, it gives a really nice impression that you have done your research well. So that's why understanding CCAR is very important and the components of it. Second is, if you see capital planning. See, if you see the term capital planning, what does that mean? Plan your capital, right? Plan your capital wisely, right? So it's nothing but financial institutions are required to submit comprehensive capital plans that include the strategies for maintaining adequate capital level at the financial institution. So, understanding, okay, because all these things requires, it's not a one person, a one person can do it, or it's a bunch of team that work on, each component of it. So if you see capital adequacy, there's a good amount of team, that will be working on capital adequacy. There'll be a good, different members who will be working on capital planning. So what is capital planning? So financial institutions are required to submit a oops, to submit a comprehensive capital plan that includes their strategies for maintaining adequate capital levels. So this is the second component, which is capital planning. Third component, stress testing. I guess if you guys are familiar with stress testing, right? It is nothing but there are some hypothetical scenarios, and you use those hypothetical scenarios to evaluate the bank's capital adequacy. See, you might have used stress testing in models, right? I mean, using different scenarios of the input parameters, you see how your model is performing, right? Similarly, for banks also, the Fed basically, they give, okay, hypothetical scenarios, and they ask the bank to understand, to check, or let's say to evaluate what is the bank capital adequacy. Okay, so the Federal Reserve conducts annual stress testing. This is very important term, annual stress testing. See, CCAR, always remember, or let me write here. Okay, one more thing, time is done on an annual basis. Okay, done on a annual basis. So what does that mean? This basically means that every year bank has to perform CCAR every year. So that's why I've written it's done on an annual basis. Okay. Stress testing, right? So the Federal Reserve conducts annual stress testing hypo okay, using hypothetical scenarios to evaluate the bank's capital adequacy. See, you might be understanding everything, what each component, it's all related to capital. Capital means what? Money, right? So bank has to manage their money, right? Bank has to manage their capital. So first is capital adequacy. Second is, okay, they need to submit a comprehensive capital plan. Third is they need to stress test so that they can understand if they have adequate capital or not. And the last thing is qualitative review. Okay. So what is qualitative review? So basically, the Federal Reserve assesses the qualitative aspect of banks' capital planning, and that's where they give a report. Whether whether the results, right, is it approved or not approved. So qualitative review is nothing but the Federal Reserve here, the Federal Reserve assess the qualitative aspect of banks' capital planning. Okay. So up till now, any doubts, guys? Up till now. So there are four components: capital adequacy, capital planning, stress testing, and qualitative review. Any doubts up till now?
Um, I have one doubt.
Sure, sure, Shivani.
Go ahead.
Yeah, could you please repeat the concept of stress testing? Oh, I mean, like this is like kind of new for me, but
Okay,
like
okay,
if you go through, yeah,
okay.
thanks.
So basically, what happens is, so stress testing I'll actually cover in detail when we go through the model life cycle. But what happens in general is, let's say interest rates. You know, so Federal Reserve, what they'll do is they'll give hypothetical scenarios to the bank. So let's say, the rates go from 5.5% to, let's say, 7%. This is one hypothetical scenarios, and let's say they'll say, okay, the rates increase by 25 basis point every quarter, something like that, right? So
Yeah,
what? This is just an example. So bank has, see, if you see, uh, banks, uh, they highly, are interest rate sensitive, highly, right? If, let's say, if you see interest rate dropping, that will have a lot of effect on the bank's capital, right? Same as if you see interest rate rising, then also it will have a lot of impact on bank's capital. So that's why, like, this is like just one indicator, interest rate. Second can be housing price index. Third can be GDP. There are so many different economic parameters, which basically, so what Federal Reserve do is they'll give you a hypothetical scenario of each parameter, right? That, okay, if this goes from this to this, what will happen to your bank's capital? So you need to make sure. So that's why I'm saying we'll understand this in detail, because there are three scenarios: base, adverse, and severe adverse, which I'll cover in the model life cycle. But just
okay,
understand stress testing in simple word. Basically, what it means is there'll be some hypothetical scenarios that the Federal Reserve will give to the bank, and they'll say, okay, using this hypothetical scenarios, how does your capital look? So because because if there are different scenarios, right? Of course, the capital will also differ. It is not that the capital will remain same in all the scenarios, right? So accordingly, they need to do capital planning again. If, let's say, there's something like, let's say, in a specific scenario, they saw that the bank is performing really poorly, and they do not have money to capital to operate in economic stress conditions, then the Federal Reserve will ask them to increase the capital buffer that they have in their bank. So in simple words, how would I say that is, there are some hypothetical scenarios which Federal Reserve will give to the bank and ask them to evaluate their capital. So depending on those scenarios,
okay,
they'll run those scenarios on the on the capital, and then that's how they understand, okay, if they have adequate capital or not. But
okay, got it.
test testing is nothing but having a hypothetical scenarios. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, thanks.
yeah. So any more doubt up till now?
Yeah,
Yes,
Mehul, I
Mehul.
had a quick question.
Sure, sure, Harshit.
So, while I was reading about CCAR a little,
Uh-huh.
there was the concept of that banks have to maintain some minimal capital ratios while going through this process.
Right, right.
So,
So
where does that capital ratios fall in these four components?
okay, we'll definitely cover this in the if you ask me, I guess what you are referring to is tier one, I guess tier one capital ratio, right?
Yeah,
Or the
yeah.
total capital ratio, right? That falls into capital adequacy, this
Okay.
part. Yeah. See, the thing is, right now I'm just going at a surface level understanding, right? Because now if you see capital adequacy itself, I'll tell you this. So if you see capital adequacy itself, these have 4 to 5 components. One is all this regulatory requirement, that is all this capital ratios, okay, which is your tier one capital ratio, and all the total capital ratio, right? And then you have something as CET1, which is nothing but common equity tier 1 ratio, right? So this is the first component. Second component is risk weighted assets. Now risk weighted asset is nothing but um, capital adequacy in general is assessed based on the risk weighted assets of the bank. So that's why they need to calculate the risk weighted asset, and then this is again divided into market risk weighted asset, credit, liquidity. Then you have some a concept of capital buffer, right? See, then you have a concept of leverage ratio. The point I'm trying to say is right now we are just going at a surface level understanding of what CCAR is, because each component again is very detailed, right?
Okay,
But
okay,
in the interviews, or let's say in journal, what they want you to understand is, okay, what is the overall process and how to build a quantitative model, because you'll be applying for a quant analyst role, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
they want you to understand what's the complete life cycle looks like, right? See, it's good if you know all these things also. It's very good if you know what is the regulatory, what are all the different ratios, tier 1 ratio, tier 2 ratio, what are different risk weighted assets, and what is the concept of capital buffer, leverage ratio. All these are very important. But for today's session, because I guess
Yeah.
we'll
Sorry for
1 hour,
that.
2 hour. Yeah,
It, just wanted to know where those ratios fall in the components. That
yeah,
was it. That was it.
yeah. So this falls into this component, capital adequacy. Yeah, yeah. Any more questions, guys?
Mehul, I understand you said when Fed is the one who usually gives us the scenarios, right? The adverse
Right,
scenarios or the baseline scenarios, right?
right, right, right.
So the CCAR test is done by the internal team in the bank or normally by the Federal Reserve itself conduct.
No, no, they'll just give you. So what happens is they'll just give you the scenarios, hypothetical scenarios for stress testing. Now bank has to make sure they have a specific team to perform all the stress testing.
Okay,
Yeah. So only the scenarios will be given by the Federal Reserve. Now it's up to the bank how they use those scenarios to perform their capital adequacy test, or perform like the stress testing of their capital.
okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Oof, great. Good questions. Any other questions? So, okay. See now, what are the outcomes? When bank, so after performing all this, right? So what happens is banks, let's say bank submit the result to the Federal Reserve. Okay. So what happens is the Federal Reserve, based on reviewing all this, CCAR, the Federal Reserve can actually approve or they can object to the bank's capital plan. So if let's say if there's any objection made by the Federal Reserve, then they have to revise the plan for their capital, for all the capital distribution that they have done in their portfolios. So basically, what is the outcome of this? So after performing DFAST, okay, after performing CCAR, and that. So after performing CCAR, bank will submit bank will submit CCAR result to Federal Reserve, okay, Fed. Okay, so basically now Fed can approve or it can object the bank's capital plan. Okay, so after they approve, or let's say if they object, So let's say if in case the object, so what the bank has to do is they have to reassess, okay, or let's say they have to revise, okay, sorry, yeah, they have to revise their capital plan again. So this is the outcome of CCAR. So nothing but okay, they'll perform, bank will perform CCAR. They submit the results to the Fed. Either the Fed will approve or the Fed will object the results. And if they object, the bank has to revise their capital plan again. So also one more thing which is very important. CCAR results in general, right? CCAR results are actually disclosed in the public. Okay, they are disclosed in the public. Why do we disclose the, or let's say why do Federal Reserve disclose the results to public is so that there is transparency maintained by the banks to all the borrowers and all the shareholders. Okay, yeah, this is just to make you understand what happens after CCAR, after the banks perform CCAR. So now moving on to the DFAST. So up till now, any other questions?
No, well, I'm good.
Okay. So Dodd-Frank Act stress testing. And this is DFAST is one place where I've worked extensively. So what is DFAST, right? Let me give you an overview of DFAST. See, this keyword, always remember there's a reason why they have kept the name like this. For CCAR also, if you see, capital analysis is very important. Same for DFAST, stress testing is very important, right? So let me give you an overview of what is DFAST. See, this act came into an act. This act came into existence in 2010. In 2010. So what is the aim of, or let's say what is the purpose of DFAST, right? So DFAST aim to assess the capital sufficiency of the bank under adverse economic condition, ensuring that they can absorb losses and can continue the operations. So what is the main? So the main goal of DFAST is performing stress testing in the bank. Okay, so the DFAST, if you see, DFAST aims to assess the capital sufficiency of a bank under adverse economic situation or adverse economic condition, ensuring the financial institutions, or let's say banks, can absorb losses and can continue their operation. You might be having a lot of doubts in, okay, if CCAR is also doing capital adequacy, capital planning, and DFAST is also, we are checking capital sufficiency of the bank. So like, what's the major difference? I'll cover the difference in the end, but let me walk you through what is DFAST in general. Okay, so if you see applicability. So if you see, is applied to DFAST is applied to broad range of financial institution, which basically includes smaller banks and certain non-bank financial companies. But mostly it is applied to smaller banks. Okay, DFAST is applied to a broad range of financial institutions, including smaller banks. Okay, so this is very important. So DFAST is mostly applied to smaller banks. Again, so let's understand what is the key component of DFAST. Key component of DFAST. See, if you see the very first component, and this is like the major thing in DFAST is stress testing. Of course, because the name only suggests stress testing, right? So this is the first component, which is stress testing. So like CCAR, DFAST also involves stress testing under various economic scenarios provided by the Federal Reserves. Now these scenarios are designed to evaluate how banks' capital level would be affected by different types of economic stress. So like CCAR, DFAST involves stress testing. Stress testing means giving hypothetical scenarios, okay, under various economic scenario. Okay, sorry, under various involves stress testing under various economic scenarios by the Federal Reserve. Okay, so these scenarios are designed to evaluate how banks' capital level would be affected by different type of economic situation, by different types of economic stress, basically, when we say economic stress. One important thing to note here is DFAST is quantitative in nature, whereas CCAR is both qualitative and quantitative in nature. And this is like very important. So DFAST is primarily focused on quantitative assessment and actually does not include a qualitative review. Okay. So DFAST is primarily focused on quantitative assessment, where whereas CCAR is focused on both qualitative and quantitative assessment. Okay. So again, reporting wise also they are same that banks are required to report the stress test results to the Federal Reserve and publicly disclose them. This is just to make sure like there is transparency in the whole financial institution. Now, what is the key difference, right? What is the key difference between C? Okay, up till now, any questions up till now?
वो मैं उलान लेता
The first is what as I said, um, CCAR, the first, right? So CCAR involves both qualitative and quantitative assessment, whereas DFAST is mostly focused on quantitative assessment. Second, CCAR, if you see timeline wise, as I said, it's an annual exercise, whereas DFAS is biannual. So every alternate year you do, but CCAR you need to perform every year. Third, the third is regulatory impact, which basically means CCAR can directly influence a bank's capital distribution plan based on the Federal Reserve approval or objection, whereas DFAS primarily assess the capital adequacy. If you see, DFAST is mostly it primarily assess capital adequacy, right? But for CCAR can directly influence a bank. CCAR can influence the capital distribution plan, right? Based on if if based on whether Federal Reserve has any objection or it has approved the CCAR. Fourth, CCAR it applies to banks with total consolidated assets of $100 billion, whereas DFAST. See, I'm not sure for DFAST, but I'll maybe after this class I'll just let you know what is the applicability for DFAST. So I'm little unsure on this. But what I remember, I'm not sure, so that's why I'll not commit. But maybe I'll just let you know what is the applicability for DFAST, like what is the range of DFAST. But just to make sure, it includes smaller banks. Okay, so DFAST you do for smaller banks. So, yeah, so these are some major differences between CCAR and DFAST. Any doubts up till now? Did you guys understand what is CCAR and DFAST?
Yeah, Mehul.
Yes.
Perfect,
Yes,
perfect,
ma'am.
perfect, great, great. Now let's focus on the model building exercise, right? And that's where the role of quants come into existence. Okay, first let me tell you how to build a model. Let's talk about DFAST because I have worked extensively on DFAST. So let me tell you how to build a model in DFAST. See what happens is, so I'll give you one example. So let's say you are trying to stress test. Now you should understand DFAST is what stress testing, right? Let's say you are trying to stress test your mortgage balance, right? See, now you see banks have different banks in general, they provide different loans, right? Mortgage loans, auto loans, credit card loans, personal loan, which includes educational loan or anything else, right? So let's take an example of mortgage loan, right? Or let's say mortgage balance that they have. So we are trying to stress test the mortgage portfolio that the bank has. So I'll tell you like what happens, like the first thing that happens is um data collection. Okay. So of course you'll ask respective stakeholders to give you the mortgage balance for the bank from the inception. Okay. Let's say you got the data from 2010 to 2024. Okay, this is the time period you got your mortgage balance data. And guys, please stop me if in case you have any doubt at any point of time. So this is the first thing, collecting data from the respective stakeholders. So now you got your mortgage balance data from the year 2010 to 2020, right? Now, of course, you will perform data cleaning, you'll make sure, okay, all the data is cleaned. Now, again, we have different steps for data cleaning, making sure there is no no duplicate data, right? No duplicate data in the model. Check if there's any outlier or not, right? Now check again if there's any missing value or not. Also, sometimes what happens is you get incorrect data, so make sure make sure that the data is accurate. So making sure accuracy of data is good. Yeah. So there are certain data cleaning steps that you will perform once you have the data, right? Second step in this process. So first is data collection and data cleaning. Second step is variable selection. And now you will understand the role of cons, in specific. See, what happens is every bank has an econometric modeling team. So what the econometric modeling team does is they'll give you different economic parameters, right? Now, what are economic parameters? GDP, housing price index, CPI, which is nothing but your inflation, interest rates. Now this can be 1 month, 3 month, 4 month, 6 month, 1 year, up till 30 year, right? New home sales. There are more than, I guess, 500 plus economic parameter. Good amount of economic parameters that the econometric modeling team will give you. Now, using all these parameters, you need to build a model. Using all these parameters, you need to build a model for what? You need to build a model for your mortgage balance or your mortgage portfolio. Okay, because right now we are just focusing on the mortgage portfolio. I'm just taking a very specific example. Okay, now again, since there are different portfolios, so that's why you'll have different models. But let's focus on mortgage portfolio. So what happens is you have this balance here, mortgage balance, which is your Y variable, right? Now you'll have bunch of economic parameters, right? X1, X2, X3, up till X, let's say 500. These are your economic parameters. Now, what you need to understand is you need to select 2, 3, or 4 variables, you know, depending on how much banks wants to. Like so like when we were working on it, we were told, okay, choose some not more than 2 or 3 economic parameters, which can actually define, or which can basically give you or define the variances, or tell you the variances that is happening in your portfolio. I'll tell you, don't worry. I'll just give me some time. I'll explain how it's working. You'll love this process. So Um, just give me, yeah. Okay. So what's happening is we have different economic parameters, and you need to make sure, okay, let's say we have mortgage balance here, right? So of course, not all parameters are important for mortgage balances. There will be few parameters which will be important for for mortgage balance. So what you do generally, what people do is they perform correlation. So what will correlation give you? How much your Y is correlated with X, right? Basically, correlation is what? It gives you a matrix, right? Y, X1, X2, up till X500, Y, X1, X2, up till X500, right? So what you need to make sure is this specific. So you need to check how much variable, how much your independent variables are correlated with your dependent variable. Why we are doing this is because, of course, if the correlation is high, then basically means that specific economic parameter is affecting your balances, right? So Y in our case is nothing but the mortgage balance. Okay. And X1, X2, X3, X1, X2, X3 are all economic parameters. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to find 2 or 3 economic parameters which which can tell which can tell the variance, or which can tell why our mortgage portfolio is performing the way it is. Why the mortgage balance portfolio is performing the way it is. Okay. So you might be thinking, Array, I mean, Mehul, this is such a simple exercise. Just need to find the correlation. It's like a 10 minutes game. No, not like that. I'll tell you the difficulty that people face. Issue is, let's say, housing price index. Of course, housing price index is nothing but how your housing market is doing, right? This is the indicator of housing price index is nothing but your indicator of how your housing market is, right? So we all know that this will directly influence the mortgage balance. So you might be thinking, oh, we can just take it, right? No, not like that. See, since you have monthly data for housing price index, right? Month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4. It can happen that when, or let's say current month, which is 0, let's say, okay. And this is previous month, -1, -2, -3, -4 is, let's say what is, so M is equal to 0 means current housing price index. M equal to -1 basically means previous month housing price index. Okay, and similarly, M equal to -2 means here like it's basically lag 2. Okay, like previous month housing, 2 months back, what was the housing price index? Okay, 2 months back, what was the housing price index? So sometimes what happens is, uh, it can happen that the correlation for the mortgage balance with the HPI is not that high, but the correlation for mortgage balance with this specific month, which is lag of 2 or lag of 1, the correlation for that might be high. Did you guys, are you guys following? So what can happen is, see, housing price, so we have your mortgage balance, right? So the correlation between your mortgage balance and the current housing price index might be low, let's say 0.6, but the correlation between mortgage balance and HPI -1, let's say M -1, basically the previous month, it can be 0.8. And let's say 2 months back, it can be 0.95. So now this exercise becomes very difficult. Why? Because this is one economic parameter. Yeah, how many? 500 economic parameter. So you need to assess the correlation between all of them. So I'll check the correlation between all of them. And then for all the 500 economic parameter, I'll do the same exercise. Now this becomes a computationally intensive task, right? Because first you need to not just find the correlation between all the economic parameters, but you need to find the correlation between all the previous lags of the economic parameter. Are you guys able to follow or not? Please tell me.
Yeah, Mehul.
Yeah, Mehul.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So I'll give you one example. So what happened was when we, so something like we basically built a model, something like, let me write it and then I'll explain. So something like this, we were able to, come up. And this is not like I'm just making this up. Okay, something, of course, something like this, but yeah, just making this up. Okay, so let me write this thing. Okay, just give me 1 second. So let's say we basically build a model we were finally able to build a model with this technical specification. Now if you see, mortgage balance current is dependent on mortgage balance, previous mortgage balance. This is what, any guesses? AR1 model, right?
Yeah.
AR1 model, so this becomes a time series model. Now these are economic parameters which we find out using this exercise. Okay, these are the economic parameters which are important. Quarter 2, quarter 3, what are they? They are dummy variables. So what happens is, if you see, right, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, January to March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, right? These are the specific quarters. Everyone knows in the that during the summer month, the portfolio for mortgages goes high because they are the people in the country, they buy and sell a lot of their mortgages during the summer month. So to capture those seasonality, to capture those seasonality, you need to include the quarter terms. See, this I'm telling you, this is just one example, okay? And the specifications of the model will change depending on what is the portfolio of the model, how the balances are growing, declining, and what else, right? Depending on, so that's why I'm saying it depends a lot on how the model is been built. So let's say this is your specification that came out into place. So just remember, this is again a time series model, right? You might, and that's how the concept of time series is being used in the industry. It is not like, okay, you'll just use AR1 and build your model, because this is not a, this will be a very bad model, because you are just saying, okay, my whatever balance I have today actually depends on last month's or last yesterday's balance. No, I mean, that doesn't explain anything. So time series is not used single-handedly. It is used with bunch of other variables, and that's how you say, okay, this is a good model, because it is capturing, of course, the mortgage balances and with other economic parameters and with the seasonality component, right? Q2, Q3 are nothing but your seasonality component, that in this specific quarters the balance goes up. So, and this also you need to, it's not like, okay, this is a very easy exercise. I'm telling you, it's a very, you need to test for so many, you'll have to perform so many tests and so many again and again you need to run your model and check how your model is performing. So this is how the concept of time series is being used. uh, and again, it's not like you can just use MB minus one. You'll again have to test which component should we use. Should we use let's say previous month's mortgage balance? Should we use 2 months back? Should we use 3 months back? That's why I'm saying it's a very exhausting exercise, and it's not that easy. But this is how you basically come up with the equation of the model, right? So once you and did you now understand what is in the second step, if you see, the second step was variable selection. After you did the variable selection, the next step is what? Using the next step is nothing but uh try different time series model. Okay.
Mehul, just a question.
Yeah, sure.
So in the second step, we are just selecting the variables for our model. So we are using a
Yeah.
correlation. We are using correlation metrics to define which variable is having a relation with a dependent variable, and
Mm-hmm.
basis that we will sort the two or four variables for our model.
Right.
Okay.
And also one more thing which I want to highlight. See, sometimes even though the correlation might be high for a specific variable, but if you're not able to give a business intuition of why a specific economic parameter influence your mortgage balances, then you cannot incorporate that variable even if the correlation is high. Are you understanding this concept? Let's say there's some X economic parameter which has, let's say, 99% correlation, right? But what happens is you do not know how this X economic parameter influence your mortgage balance. So that's where the dilemma comes. Even though statistically you see you have a good correlation, but you cannot include it in the model because you cannot provide a business justification to the other stakeholders as well as to Federal Reserve. That's why it's important to make sure you have all the variables which basically use all those variable which can give economic justification of why how this parameter actually impacts the mortgage balances. Let's say interest rates, right? Now see, and that's where I'm saying, this equation might change depending on uh what portfolio you have. Let's say there can be interest rate of, let's say, 15-year, right? Which can also be included in this specific equation. or let's say depending on which bank you are working on, let's say interest, they are very, let's say for the 15-year interest rate are very sensitive to the mortgage balance, so they have to include this parameter. So that's why I'm saying you need to make sure, because if you see interest rate has a direct relationship to your mortgage balance. How? If your interest rates are going high, let's say right now if you see somewhere around 7.5% interest rates, right, for mortgage balance, for mortgage portfolio, for mortgage loan, people don't it's not very motivating for them to uh, go and take a mortgage loan at this specific interest rate, versus let's say if the interest rate was, let's say, just 2% or 3%, there will be so much activity in the mortgage portfolio. So many people will go buy homes because the interest rates are cheaper, right? So that's why there are a lot of variables that might impact the portfolio of your bank. And then again, it depends on how you are building the model, or how the team is building the model. But putting that in simpler words, there are a bunch of economic parameters that can influence your balance, your portfolio. So you need to make sure you use those economic parameters. You use the dummy variables if necessary. If there's any time series component associated with it, you should actually test those time series component also. And if not, that is totally fine. It's not always necessary that you have to build a time series model. You can actually also build a linear regression model. So for that, this component will be eliminated. Okay, you'll just have this component and you'll run your linear regression model. But this is just an example I'm providing you. So now what's the next step? Once you have come up with a, let's say, specific equation, right? What is the next step? So the next step is to backtest the model. So your fourth step is backtest the model. So what does backtesting means? Backtesting is the process of evaluating a model's predictive power using the historical data, and understand how well the model has performed in the past. Okay, so backtesting is the process of evaluating the predictive power of the model so basically predicting power of the model using the historical data. Why we use historical data? So that to assess how well the model would have performed in the past. See, always remember backtesting. Back, if you see, just there is a reason why the terms are written like that. Back testing. Back means what? Past. You are testing the historical data. Past means historical data, right? Testing means you are testing the historical data. So backtesting in general means you have built a model. Now you are using that model to check how your what's the predictive power of that model on the historical data. So let's say you have this. Okay, let's say you have this specific equation, right? If what we saw up here, let's say this is the equation, right? So okay, one more component is okay, and one more component is model training and testing, which this is my bad. Yeah, I model training and testing. So let's say this is fourth component. So and this is your fifth component. Okay. So what happens is before coming up to this model equation, you cannot say, oh, this model is working good. You need to train and test your model. So what happens? People sometimes say 80:20 ratio or 70:30 ratio. I generally follow this because then you have good sample on to train your model and then good sample for testing your model, right? So what does model training and model testing means? So let's say since we discussed, we have data from 2010 to 2024. So what you can do is train your model from 2010 to 2022 and then test your model from 2023 to 2024. Okay. So this is how you can basically tell, okay, yeah, this model is performing good or not. But what does backtesting means? Okay, let me tell you what this backtesting means. Let's say you have built your model in this specific data set. Okay, you have trained your model. Okay, just 1 second, guys. 2024. So actually, sometimes what people do, okay, then again, it's this is one thing which I've realized, and this depends on who is modeling, who the modeler is. But sometimes what people do is they take the complete data set, but sometimes they do like this. So what backtesting means is, let's say you have a model that you came up with, you'll use this model and test on this specific data set, right? So what will happen? Of course, you have new home sale data, previous data, housing price data, you have mortgage balance data, you have quarter two, quarter three, right? Quarter two, quarter three is nothing but dummy variable 1001000, something like this, right? So or yeah, so let's say if it's January, February, March, April, if it's the month of April, then quarter two will be 1 and quarter three will be 0. Did you do you understand or not? Did you agree? So what will yeah, so what will happen is, let's say from 2010 to 2024, right? You'll have this bunch of data, right? So what will happen is you'll run your model on this specific data, and then after you run your model, what you will get your mortgage balances, right? Which is your predicted data from 2010 to 20, let's say 2024 or 2022, depending on what historical period you are considering. Okay, so you have your predicted data, you also have your actual data. So you'll check how your predicted data have, what's the difference between your prediction and your actual. So if the prediction versus actual is very, it's very far off, then the model is not good. That's why backtesting is very important. But if these values are coming very close by, if the difference between your actual and your predicted comes very close by, then you can say you have done a very good job of building the model. So up till now, any doubt? So that's why backtesting is very, very important, because it tells how your model has performed in the past. See, let's say if you have a huge difference, the main reason of why we build the model is so that we can understand how the balances will perform in the future, or let's say, right? And let's say if we have built this model, and the model itself is not giving good result in the past data, how can I expect it to give a good result in the future data? You cannot expect, like, right? So you first need to make sure whatever model you have built is giving a good result on your past data. So did you guys understand backtesting or not?
Yeah, Mehul.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Any
I have a question.
sure, Sidra.
So to check our model's performance, we use metrics like root mean square error or percentage error.
Good question.
So are there any other metrics that we use to check our model's performance?
Okay, let me tell you. Test for or let's say metrics for model. That's a really good question. Metrics used for the models. See, I said, okay, okay, the value should be close by, actual versus, the difference between the actual value and your predicted value should be close, and that's where you can conclude, okay, your model did a good job, or let's say you have a good model. But it is not that, there are a bunch of metrics which, industry uses, which is RMSE, MSE, MAE, there's one more thing, MAPE, something like that. This is root mean square error. MSE is mean square error. MAE is mean absolute error. MAP is mean absolute percentage error, something like that. I'm not sure. I have forgot the full form. Anyone?
Percentage error.
Yeah, mean absolute
It,
percentage.
it's
This is
correct, Mehul.
okay. Perfect. Mean absolute percentage error. Now, what is RMSE, MSE, MAE? Right? Let me tell you. So Just remember the full form, and I'm telling you, the formula becomes very easy. RMSE is root, mean, square, error. Always remember, error is nothing but your actual minus predicted. So whatever your actual data is minus whatever your model has given. Prediction is nothing but whatever comes out of your model. Okay. So you'll have bunch of, you'll have data from 2010 to 2020, let's say 2022, right? You'll have, so you'll calculate, okay, for each month, or what was your actual data and what was your predicted data, right? And that's how you'll get a error, basically a error from 2010 to 2022. This is how you define error. Error is nothing but, always remember, we'll just go root, mean, square, error. So we'll go in this direction, that is right to left, ulta. Okay. We always go like that, but in this specific case we'll go like this. Okay, always remember, we'll go like this. So first we'll calculate error, then we'll square the error, then we'll take mean of the error, then we'll take root of the error. So now you have got, what have you got here? Error term, actual minus predicted, right? So your actual, you have actual minus predicted, you have got the errors from 2020 to 2022. Now if this, what's the second step? You will square the error. So you will just square these errors. Okay, you'll just square these errors. So this gives you square. Now third is what? Mean. You'll take the mean of this. So this will give you some value, let's say a. So this is the third step, which is mean. What is the fourth step? Take root of a. So this gives you your RMSE. Understand or not? Are you able to, guys, are you able to follow or not?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. So similarly you have this was RMSE. This second is MSE. MSE is nothing but mean, square, error. So again we'll go from in the reverse direction. Okay, first, second, third. So what is your error? Guys, please tell, what is error?
actual minus predicted.
Perfect. So you'll get your error term from 2010 to 2022, what, right? Whatever your previous data, whatever you have your previous data. So now your first thing is calculating the error. What is the second thing? Calculating the square. So you'll just take square of each term. Okay, so you'll take square of each term. And the third thing is taking mean is nothing but taking the average of it. Let's say we have 100 observation. So you'll do x. So let's say these are x1, x2. So you'll do x1 plus x2 plus x3 up till x100, right? Divided by 100. So you'll take the average of it. So this is what mean square error means. Are you able to follow or not? So these are, and similarly, mean absolute error is nothing but you'll calculate the error a minus b, take the absolute of it. What is absolute? Absolute means even if it's negative or positive, the end result should be positive, right? So let's say your error, so let's say the third is mean absolute error. Mean absolute error. So we will again go in this direction, right? Calculate error first, calculate absolute, and then calculate mean. So your error is nothing but actual minus predicted. Take, so let's say this value comes out to be something like this: 2 minus 3 minus 0.5, 1 minus 0.6, something like this. So you'll take absolute of this. You'll take absolute. So what is absolute of 2? 2. Absolute of negative 3 is 3. Absolute of negative 0.5 is 5. 1 is 1. Absolute of 0.6 is 6. And then nothing but you'll take mean of this to get your MAE. So these are the metrics that you will use for backtesting, understanding. Most of the people in the industry, they use RMSE, which is a very good measure to, basically check how much if the backtesting result is good or not. So this was the backtesting. Now the next component, oops, sorry. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So the next component is what? Test testing. See, before stress testing, do you understand the pain? How much there's so much pain of building the Excel model. You need to collect the data, clean the data, perform variable selection, then try different bunch of time series model or different parameters, and understand which is a good model, and then perform back testing. Again, if the back testing results are not good, you'll again have to again have to go back. You'll again have to change your economic parameters. Again, you need to try a bunch of time series model or linear regression model, and then again perform back testing. If the results are satisfactory, then you go on to the stress testing. Otherwise, the cycle repeats and repeats and repeats, and it's a very exhausting exercise. So now coming on to the stress testing of the model. This is where DFAST, as I said, I've worked extensively on DFAST. So in stress testing, there are three scenarios: adverse. Sorry, let me tell you what are the scenarios: base, adverse, severe adverse. So these are the three stress testing scenarios that every bank has to follow: base, adverse, and severe adverse. Guys, just give me one second. Let me drink some water. So let's understand what is base, what is adverse, and what is severe adverse scenario. Okay, base scenario, a severe adverse scenario, and severe adverse scenario. And these all scenarios are used to stress test the model. Okay, so let's understand what is base scenario, what is adverse, what is severe adverse. First, base scenario. The base scenario is nothing but it represents normal economic conditions that are expected to occur on the current forecast. Okay, see, always remember, back testing is in the past, stress testing is always future. Okay, are you guys able to follow? Back testing is in the past, stress testing is in the future. So base scenario, what is a base scenario? So the base scenario is nothing but it represents the normal economic situation. It represents the normal economic situation or normal economic condition that are expected to occur based on the current forecast. Okay, this is base scenario. Base basically means, okay, the economic scenarios are normal, like it's a normal economic condition. Okay, second, what is adverse scenario? So adverse scenario is nothing but it tells you if there is a let's say the economic scenario, sorry, my bad, sorry, adverse scenario, right? The adverse scenario models a moderate economic downturn. So it represents a situation wherein the economy experiences some stress. So it's like a mild recession. Okay. So what is the adverse scenario? So the adverse scenario models a moderate economic downturn. Okay, so it represents a situation wherein where the economy experiences where the economy experiences uh experiences let's say some mild stress, or let's say economic some stress which is nothing but a mild recession, like a mild recession. Okay, what mild recession? So it experiences some stress. Okay, the third component, or let's say the third stress testing condition is severe adverse. See, from the name only, you might be understanding. Okay, base is okay, the normal economic condition. Adverse means okay, some mild, some stress in the economy, but severe adverse, right? Something is major happening. So the severe adverse, scenario, it is nothing but it represents a economic stress, a deep recession. So it's basically a worst case scenario that is highly unlikely, but it can be possible. Okay. So severe adverse scenario is nothing but it simulates us. It it is a scenario wherein economy experiences experiences of severe economic stress, like a like a deep deep or like a deep recession. Okay. So this is nothing but it is a worst case scenario. It is a worst case scenario that is highly unlikely, and that is highly unlikely to occur, uh, but possible. So what will happen is, let's say now you have this model equation, which is like something like this, right? If you remember, mortgage balance is equal to mortgage previous month mortgage balance, new home sales plus housing price index plus quarter two, quarter three, plus some error term. You all of you know, right? There's a error term that comes into a model, right? So what will happen is, for all this economics, so what will change in the economic, in the stress conditions is only the economic parameters. So for all the economic parameters that you have in your model, in our case, we have new home sales and housing price index, right? So we'll have a base scenario, adverse scenario, severe adverse scenario. For base scenario, new home sale will have some value. For adverse, it will have some value. For severe adverse, it will have some value. And same goes for housing price index. Base, it will have some value. For adverse, it will have some value. For severe adverse, it will have some value. Now, what if this is one of the one of the issue that I faced was when we were building the model in the severe adverse scenario. The model was giving, see what happens in the severe adverse scenario is, it's a deep recession, right? So when if it's a deep recession, what happens is there's no mortgage activity. People in during recession, no one wants to get a loan, right? Because the interest rates are high and there are a lot of stuff happening, and people do not want to take another risk of getting a mortgage loan. So of course the activity of the mortgages is very very low or zero in those really high stress economic situation or like a deep recession. So what happened was, this difficulty that we faced was we were getting negative values of mortgage portfolio balances. Now this is again an issue. You cannot have your balance of your so if you are predicting the mortgage balance, it cannot have negative. What it can go is up to zero, right? So what we realized was because of which component are we getting a negative result. So let's say there was this X component. So we actually took the absolute of that X component so that it doesn't, if so that it can actually go to zero, but it does not go to negative. So these are the modeling challenges that you will face in when you are building a model from scratch. And that's why, that's why this when this happened was in the severe adverse scenario, that the model was giving us a negative results. Now the balance can go zero or positive, it cannot go negative. And that's where we realized, dude, this, I mean, whatever, I mean, we worked for almost how much, 2 months. We built this model, the whole activity. and then it's giving a negative result. It's so funny, right? I mean, how can a model give a negative result? So then that's where we realize, okay, we can take an absolute of a specific economic parameter or some specific term which is leading or which is giving us a, which is giving us a, what should I say, the negative results. So when, as soon as we took the absolute of that, it was giving zero or positive results. So these are the, challenges that you will also face in your modeling when you are building a different quantitative model. So then these are the stress testing you will have to perform in the model, right? And the last component, whoa, and we are up to the end of the session, right? So the last component of it, the last component is nothing but you're performing sensitivity analysis. Performing sensitivity analysis. So sorry, up till now, any doubt?
I'm good, Mehul.
No,
Mehul, I
I'm
just had
good.
one quick question.
Sorry, I didn't get you. Can yeah.
I just had a quick question.
Uh,
So you mentioned that for we we input values for economic parameters, right?
mhm.
So the values for those parameters for severe, adverse, or base conditions are provided by the Fed, or do we use any
Yeah.
uh, historical values for
No,
those
no.
cases?
As I said, stress testing is always forward looking. If you see what here I mentioned, right? Back testing is in the back, in the past. Stress testing is always in the future. We are performing stress testing for the future. So the future values in all these different scenarios will be given by the Federal Reserve. So what happens in the future will be given by the Federal Reserve.
Okay,
Does,
got it.
yeah. Any other question, guys? Okay, I'll take that as no. So the last piece is sensitivity analysis. Now, sensitivity in what do we do in sensitivity analysis is basically it involves examining how the model output or prediction responds to change in input variables, or let's say a specific variable. Let's say so stress scenario analysis is nothing but, oh sorry, sensitivity analysis is nothing but it involves examining how the model output or prediction, how the model output or prediction will respond to changes in the input variable. So let's say if you see this specification that we had, mortgage balance is equal to last month mortgage balance, new home sales, housing price index, quarter two, quarter three, plus some, let's say dummy, plus let's say some error. Okay. Let's say this was our, so what we'll do is, let's say for new home sales, right? How will you perform sensitivity analysis? Let's say plus minus 1%, plus minus 2%, plus minus 5%. So you will basically change just one parameter and then you will check how your model is performing. Same for, let's say, this is for with respect to new home sale. Then you'll use housing price index, right? Again, housing price index will perform the same kind of stress testing. Okay, what if you have changes in plus, up till plus one, plus one, plus one, minus 1%, plus two, minus 2%, and this sensitivity you'll again need to check with the model validation team, right? Or some other team, how many sensitivity, like till what you need to sensitivize your model. So this range will be mostly given by either your head of your quant modeling team, or maybe some any other team which has let's say your, there will be a mortgage team, right, in your bank. So there you can ask them how much sensitivize you need to do your model. So sensitivity analysis in general, it means nothing but if you change one specific variable, let's say if we change just the new home sale, how your model is performing. Similarly, if you change your housing price indexes, how your model is performing. So this is also a very integral part of the whole exercise. So if you see, you might have done this, yeah. If you see Greeks in in option pricing, What is Greeks? If you see, okay, what do? You are performing sensitive, in a way you're performing sensitivity analysis only, right? What is the change in option price with respect to change in your underlying stock? This is what your delta, right? Similarly, changing your option price with respect to change in, let's say, delta. This is what your gamma, right? Again, change in option price with respect to change in interest rates. This is what your row, right? So this is again what you're basically uh, just checking how your, one specific parameter, like if that changes, how your model output will change, right? So that's why Greeks are nothing but you performing sensitivity analysis to your options price. But again, I'm just giving you an example so that you understand, this concept is used all over in multiple ways. It's just that you need to grab that concept. Okay, this is what our sensitivity analysis is. So in the case of Greeks, we are performing sensitivity analysis on the option price, basically changing each parameter and checking how the option price is changing, right? Similarly, in our case, in this specific model, we'll change new home sales and then check what's the, how is mortgage balance portfolio is performing. Same for every component. Now, quarter three, we cannot perform sensitivity analysis on this. And similarly for this, so it's mostly on the economic parameters. So I hope you understand. So this was the complete life cycle of building a model. I'll just summarize it so that it's easy for you. So the first, summary is nothing but first step is data collection, collecting the data from the business stakeholders, then data cleaning, making sure you have a clean data, then selecting the right variables, in our case, economic variables for your model with your seasonal variables, if in there are any seasonal variables, plus any time series component, right? So in this case, what we took was AR1. You can also take MA1, in which you are basically including the error term, right? So you can basically use all this. Basically, you'll selection of the right variables is your third step. Fourth step is model training and testing. So you'll train and test your model. Okay. So 80 is to 20, right? Sorry, 80 is to 20 or something like that. Then you'll perform, say, you'll perform backtesting. After backtesting, you'll perform stress testing. So backtesting is always on the historical data, and stress testing is always on the future data. Stress testing. The next step is sensitivity analysis. And if the results are good for all of these, that's where you can say, yes, the model has done a great job and this has passed all this, life model. So this is like a complete model life cycle of let's say a model built for DFAST. Okay. So again, now in next session, what we'll focus is on validating the model. Because again, if I start the validating, it will again take 80 to 90 minutes, again 1.5 hours, and the session will go longer and longer. So in the next session, let's focus on how to validate this specific the same model, right? This same model, how do we validate it? So, but this was all about it. Do you have any doubt up till now?
No.
No.
I'm good, Mehul.
No.
Okay. Okay. So let me stop the recording and then let me ask you. Let me stop it. Just give me 1 second.